Welcome to Sundays with Lenin. We have a very special guest, singer and songwriter David Rovics from California. How are you doing, David?
Good. I did live in California. I'm from Oregon nowadays.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why I thought you were from California.
No, I lived there for many years, so it's an easy mistake.
Okay.
And it's all one big West Coast that's on fire half the time anyway. So,
When did you move
to no borders.
When did you move to Oregon?
I moved here 14 years ago when my now 15-year-old daughter was 1, just to follow her mom over here.
Okay. And okay, interesting. So you like, what's, you don't have to tell me, we can cut this out. Like, where do you live in Oregon?
Oh, in Portland. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Portland. Okay. I hear that Portland seems to be complicated because it seems has a double reputation of being very progressive and also having a lot of white supremacists. So what is how does that explain for people who have never been to Portland? Like what makes it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see. Basically, Portland was founded as a white homeland in 1859. It was the only state to be founded with racial exclusion laws on the books. They were very specific, the exclusion laws about who was excluded. They had very specific definitions for who was white and who was not, and who was qualified to own land in the state of Oregon, which basically excluded most people of color, although there were some exceptions for they had definitions for Mexicans who were white and Mexicans who were not white in the state constitution in 1859. Is right there, defining whiteness or non-whiteness of Mexicans as well.
I bet you they just. I bet you none of them they're just okay, you speak Spanish, you're not white.
in actual practice, right? But the exceptions in the laws, it appears when you read it, you can tell these exceptions were made for basically white pioneers who had kids with non-whites and they want their kids to inherit their land. You could tell that's clearly why.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, okay. And had kids could be anything from I raped the entire village to I married a woman. So.
Yeah. But if you were half native or less than half native, you could own land in Oregon under the Constitution. And that was one of the few exceptions, but basically, otherwise the native people of this whole valley that I'm in now where Portland is located were all driven out and onto a barren reservation in the eastern, part of the state. Mm-hmm.
That reminds me of the Armenian genocide under the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, that's so many connections. Of course, really so many connections. Of course, in the Armenian genocide with the Ottoman Empire, they used caves with smoke, which were very much Hitler's model for the gas chambers, and they killed over 1 million Armenians through these kinds of methods, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
But
I didn't know about the caves with smokes, actually, and that's I did not know that.
Yeah, and they employed Kurds to do the killing to a large extent, also. But they, but here, the genocide, it's very much the same kind of thing in terms of the systematic killing off of all the food sources for people who were nomadic living across the plains in the United States, in what is now the United States. The systematic killing of all the buffalo, which was not done for meat or hides or whatever. It was done to destroy
the Indian, according to I forgot which president, but that president said they had the buffalo killing order to kill the Indian.
Yeah, I think that was Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, who was like a Civil War hero, but he was,
pro-genocide.
Yeah, pro-genocide hero.
Yeah, well, okay, so then we're going to now move over to another continent far, far away, who is also victims of lots of British oppression. So are you Irish, or what is your background with Ireland? How does this work?
I mean, definitely Irish, Hungarian, Russian, and English primarily. But just to finish the thought in terms of the why Portland. I mean, Portland and Oregon has this whole white supremacist history, and it goes way far back, and that's also related to the progressive history. I mean, it's related to that
because they're fighting the white supremacy. So oh, that's like how. Exactly. Oh,
because
that's
Portland,
why. Yeah. Hold on, you actually helped me a lot. This is why. Socialism beats, it's not that socialism beats barbarism. Socialism arises as a way to combat barbarism. Is that a better way to explain
it? That's totally what happened here. I mean, basically, I mean, in a nutshell, because I mean, Portland was the center, and there are people who are here then who can tell you a lot more about it. But Portland was in the 1980s, Portland, along with Minneapolis, a very white city as well, was one of the centers of, I mean, especially back then and before the Somali, exodus and Portland was one of the centers of groups like White Aryan Resistance and other white supremacist networks. And, and there were killings here. And it was also, as a result of that, it was a center for anti-fascist activity as well. And the anti-fascists really largely drove the fascists out of the city to a large extent.
Good job. Yeah. Next time, just drive them 6 feet under and
make what 6 feet under?
No, you have to drive fascists 6 feet under, right? Underground.
Well, that's what I think. What was it that Trotsky said that every socialist has the responsibility to acquaint every fascist head with the sidewalk or something like that. Is one.
I don't think that was Trotsky, but
was it not Trotsky?
I don't know who, but it was definitely a socialist, but that doesn't sound like Trotsky. He would make some. But I know who. I know that. Yes, it was somebody from around that time period from the revolution. The reason I heard about you is because on St. Patrick's Day, I tweeted out about the San Patricio's Brigade, and somebody linked me to your song. So how did you come about this song? Did you write it? Who wrote it? And tell us about tell us about your connection with Ireland.
I wrote the song. I wrote it in, I think it was around the year 2000, I believe. And I was opening for Howard Zinn, for the historian who was giving a speech.
I love Howard Zinn. He's my inspiration.
Oh, I love Howard Zinn. Yeah. I mean, his wonderful person and just such a fantastic
You can't be
writer.
Neutral on a moving train.
Wonderful book. And The People's History of the United States was,
life-changing for me. I first read it when I was a teenager and everything made sense to me. And it was like, this is why, for a long time, I hated history class because it was so boring. And then I read this and it just brought this spark into I actually finally understood why people love history.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I mean, he brings it alive. He tells the stories that make it so exciting. And of course, he covers so much ground in that book, but still it's so full of great stories, and history is all about great stories. And that's how I got into writing songs about history, because you can tell a great story in a song. And when I heard Zinn talking, I mean, I guess he might have mentioned the San Patricios in his book, but
I don't remember.
I don't remember,
I don't think so.
And I don't think he did.
He did not.
But in his speech that day, he was talking about them, and then I looked them up. At the time, the internet existed, so you could look. I think Wikipedia did it. I don't know.
I don't remember.
I looked them up, and then I found out about them, and I wrote the song basically.
Oh, okay. So let me for people who don't know. There was a group of Irishmen who were basically kicked out of England for probably rebelling or saying something, probably not doing anything, and they came to America, and they were drafted
during the famine, so they were starving too. I mean, it was during the period.
Yeah, England deliberately. Okay, yeah. England deliberately burnt down crops in order to do their version of Lebensraum in Ireland. I don't know what they called it, but it's the same as Lebensraum, right?
Living room?
Lebensraum. Yeah, that's when Germany went to the east, and they had this thing where they were going to murder everyone who's there. And then the idea was the Germans take over once they killed and that was exactly what England kind of did and wanted to do with it.
I mean, hundreds of years earlier, England carried out genocidal warfare campaigns against the Irish. Although in the 1840s, to be fair, the crop failure was across Europe, and there was hunger across Europe. But
I'm Indian, so I'm just going to. Okay, I'm Indian, so I always pretend everything's England's fault, and usually I've never been wrong. You'll always find
it's always a good assumption.
Yeah. Even if it's like I don't like so they've done enough bad things that I'm gonna assume that if it's a hurricane, it's definitely England's fault, and we need to send the Queen to India to face trial for her crimes against humanity.
It's a very good assumption. Yeah.
So, So I always I'm going to block out the natural part and say that the British deliberately inflicted famine that could commit genocide because they're not better. And we know that the British are capable of doing it because they did this in India for a long time.
They did. And really, I mean, although there was this natural element and the blight of the potato blight, which is a
the natural element is called British people. So,
but the thing that people, students of history really should understand also about the Irish famine is that under the government, there was two different governments in England at the time of the famine. And under the first government, the Irish people were eating. And under the second government, they were starving. And it was British engineered. And the thing was that there was a potato blight, but there was loads of other crops in Ireland that were doing just fine, and they were all being exported.
That sounds just like what Winston Churchill did to India during the...
Identical.
Yeah. And for me, last year, it was really disgusting to see all these people. This is how Winston Churchill would have handled a pandemic. And then I had a tweet that go viral. I said, he basically said, I really hate the Indian. He's a beastly, something with the beastly religion and something about he deserves to have this plague infested upon him or something like that. And so the plague was the Indian, according to Winston Churchill. So it got a lot of mileage because people don't understand. It's horrible.
Winston Churchill advocated for using poison gas against Welsh miners.
Motherfucker. Okay, oops. Let me not do that. Okay. Yeah.
Winston Churchill was a monster.
He was. No, I mean, with Indians, we know. I mean, he's the worst. His own secretary of his own home minister is what they called him, Secretary of the Interiors in England. When he went to India, basically he came back and said, when it comes to India, Winston Churchill is no different than Hitler, is what his own home minister said. Absolutely.
Incidentally, when you mentioned that quote, I learned at the Hiroshima Peace Museum when I was there a while back that the leaders of the U.S. military all were advocating to the president of the bombing campaign of Japan, stop lest we not be morally superior to the fascists, in their own words.
Yeah, I know.
Roosevelt said, keep on bombing.
Oh, no, Roosevelt was dead. It was Truman.
Roosevelt died in 1944. He was very...
No. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Hiroshima Day.
No, not he didn't... he was an advocate of dropping the atom bomb, but he wasn't alive to see it happen. But Roosevelt was a very big advocate for the so-called conventional bombardment of Japan.
Okay. Just so you guys know, the reason why they dropped the nuclear bomb was a demonstration. And so they decided that Asian people were less, it was literally a demonstration for countries and warning that we can do this to you if you decide to get rid of our corporations. So, and they used so it was mostly a demonstration to scare Russia. And the thing about Russia was the only sin that Russians committed was to decide that we don't want to be enslaved anymore by feudalism. We want food, or we want to live. We don't want to be slaves. And so, so for the sin of not wanting to be enslaved, the U.S. decided that they were going to terrorize, threaten, do everything that possible for these people. And so Hiroshima was not needed because the Japanese emperor had already agreed to surrender. They just wanted. So all somebody had to do was go to a neutral country. They could have picked any country, any country, and just sign a treaty and negotiate the terms of the surrender. And instead of doing that, they dropped an atomic bomb as a demonstration. And and
then they did it again 3 days later, knowing that the first bomb had obliterated the city and incinerated hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children. They then dropped a bomb 3 days later on another city. And they kept 6 cities in Japan unbombed during the war. One city, because they didn't think they could bomb Kyoto and later be able to rule Japan without a rebellion. Same reason why they didn't execute the emperor. But the other 5 cities that they didn't bomb were kept unbombed for the purpose of seeing what would happen when you bombed a city that was fully intact.
This is, oh my, I had no idea. This is actually, so the siege of Leningrad was the same thing. That was the Nazis experimenting on how to keep the infrastructure there, but get rid of the people.
Oh, interesting.
And so they basically, it's like, so it's heartbreaking to me when you see this, when you see what people in the East, so what people don't realize is that with World War II, the farther east you go, the worse everything gets because the poorer the people are. So what Hitler did in France is horrific, but it's nothing compared to what he did in Ukraine or Poland.
People just don't know. People in the West just have no idea. You know, the 95% of the German army was on the Eastern Front.
Yes, and 80% of and so what sometimes people are like, why don't you? And if you look at the geography, this is not hard to figure out why Russia is so pivotal. Japan is to the east of Russia. Germany is to the west of Russia. Russia is between. Those are the Axis powers. And so obviously, like, Russia will be in like way more, like it's just geography. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're in, like for them, it's some Cold War thingy. But no, geography means, even if it was, it doesn't even matter. Geography means like Russia had, the target was Russia because it's like the biggest country and it was right in between both of those. So they were involved in both campaigns. But yeah, exactly. And for me,
there's also a long history there of
I know. I'm just saying,
invading Russia.
No, obviously, no, that's not the point. The point is, yesterday I was talking to somebody, and he was like, "Why don't you praise the U.S.?" I was like, "Because they didn't do anything." And then he's like, "Normandy," and I was like, "Well, I showed them this memo, and basically, literally, they said, it is the agreement. I forgot the name of the agreement, but I can put it up here. We'll put a link down. You'll see. They basically said that in order to distract the German troops away from the Eastern Front, we're going to bomb, we're going to do whatever we're doing in Normandy. And so then, but the thing about it is that when you use the exact same word that, I forgot, I can't remember if it was FDR or Truman, that says distract away, and said like, and I once said Normandy was a distraction, and they're like, oh my God, you're minimizing it. And then I'm like, look, FDR said, and in the military, like literally said, distract away was the word. So they don't understand that. Basically U.S. was there, kind of half-heartedly there to give a little breathing room for Russia to finish the Eastern campaign.
The U.S. went in late, and I don't know, to whatever degree they're trying to help Russia with the Eastern campaign.
Allegedly,
the thing was that Russia was so close. It was already getting, the Red Army was already getting into Germany, had already liberated much of Eastern Europe. And if the Western powers wanted to have any real say in what was going to happen, then they had to actually, participate with ground troops. And prior to the invasion of Normandy, I mean, they did have troops fighting in Italy, the British and the Americans, but prior to the invasion of, I mean, it's all arguable. I mean, depending on how we're comparing it to the Eastern Front, right? But a lot of people were dying, but a lot of people died in Normandy, but in terms of the scale, I mean, that's
27 million people in the USSR. Right. So that is literally like everyone to the west of Mississippi. If we were to kill everyone and that's how World War II affected the USSR. It's exactly. And China was the number 2 country. Exactly. And 20 million. So for China, the better analogy is just wiping out the West Coast.
Oh, I mean, for China, it was an absolute...
No, I want to give people... Okay, the problem is that when you say... millions, it doesn't make sense to Americans because they don't know the population. So I'm just like giving a rough like proportion equivalent. So if like Russia had I'm just making if a country had I've studied these proportions. So with China, based on their population, which was about somewhere around 300 to 400 million, it would be equivalent of like wiping out the entire West Coast. With Russia, it's equivalent to wiping out the entire everything west of the Mississippi. So that's what I was trying to say, how big the devastation is of World War. Okay. Because people don't understand that.
People, I mean, you can make all kinds of great movies about all the people who died in Normandy, and you can make a great movie out of each one of those guys, you know, and each one of those lives is
we shouldn't feel the need to like, I had no idea why we need to feel the need to like praise Americans for any, like, I just don't think,
I'm just saying
we don't need to do a qualifier. I don't think we need to do a qualifier praise because it seems like it's catering to jingoism in America. So it's like there's a big difference when you're an imperial superpower who kind of half-heartedly does it, and when you're an illiterate peasant with a shovel and you're fighting Hitler for your life. And with Russia, they were illiterate peasants with shovels, and that's why so many died. So I don't want, like, I just don't feel the need to like praise anyone in America for this. I'm sorry. It just offends me sometimes. But okay, so can we go back? So let's just go back to your song. Can you so with St. Patrick's Day Brigade, what happened is that this man named John Riley was put out into the western frontier, and he was Catholic, and he saw that these people in Mexico, they were just like him. They were Christians, they were Catholic, they went to the same church, and he just couldn't do it. He was like, I can't do this. Oh my God, this is disgusting. And then he decided that he was going to be on God's side and not on the devil's side. And then he defected and fought on the Mexican border. And so Dave has a wonderful song. Would you be able to perform it?
Sing it for you? Sure.
Yeah.
There were, I mean, the religious aspects of the thing have been, often talked about. I think they're probably overemphasized.
And I disagree. I mean, there's nothing, I like talking about that because a lot of modern people in the West do not understand the power of religion for good. So the reason why he was able to get through the racism, like even though he had been fed the same racist propaganda, it didn't affect him because he remembered that people who are Christian are just like him. And he was like immediate. And so I like emphasizing this in this one particular part because it shows you that in the West, they just make things like not all religion's bad. And it's not, it's really culturally dependent, if that makes sense, right?
That's interesting. You think they say all religion is bad in the West?
Oh, no. A lot of Western progressives are anti-religion and they don't understand.
Okay. Yeah. Western progressives.
That's why I like bringing up this aspect because we have something here where religion is done for good.
Right. I think a lot of it was that they saw that a big Protestant country was occupying a less powerful Catholic one, and that looked very familiar.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly how religion. I'm just saying that it is possible. Like, you know what I'm talking about.
My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. So in the midst of these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed
the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We marched neath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazed with Erin Goldbra. Right with the harp and the shamrock and Libertad Republica. Just 50 years after Wolf Tone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in 5 major battles. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside at the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side.
That was beautiful. I love that song. And may we have a license to play it again?
Oh, yes. It's all registered Creative Commons also.
Yeah. And so like I said, I just tweeted that out and somebody linked me to this, and I love this song. And so what kind of genre is it? And where did you, what kind of, and where can people buy it or like get the album?
Oh, people can find it all on Spotify and all the other streaming platforms. Nobody buys albums anymore. But
well, we want to support independent musicians like you. So how would people support?
You can join the campaign to make Spotify pay out fairly. That'll support independent
how do they pay
music.
out?
They pay out according to a totally obtuse and completely non-transparent model that gives preference to the big 3 record companies who get most of the money from what you do. Whenever you listen to Spotify or your subscriber money, it just most of the payout. I think 70% of their revenue is paid out, although that itself is very not clear because they're basically a money-losing corporation based on venture capital. And they're vulture capitalists trying to destroy an entire industry in order to completely dominate it. And they have now gotten to that point, and they've gotten the record companies to agree to their terms of surrender. And for independent musicians, the situation is just way worse. And so, basically you get 1 million streams a year and you will make about $1,000 a year from Spotify. That's my situation. And that's the situation. And that's exactly my situation. And that is exactly the situation for 176,000 other musicians. There are 3 million. I just wrote something on this for Counterpunch. So
hold on. Let's put a link to we'll put the link to your article below.
It'll be in this weekend, but yeah, it'll be on this weekend's Counterpunch. But yeah.
No, this show's not airing till Sunday.
Oh, okay. So it's in right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are 3 million creators, as they call them, as Spotify calls them. On the platform, 70 million songs. There's like 200,000 songs that are streamed more than 1 million times a year, which is approximately similar number of artists who have songs who have like 1 million streams a year or more. And some of them are making a lot of money, like the big pop stars. But for so many others, because of the way the money is distributed, we end up getting about 0.1 cents per song streamed. So yeah, about $1,000 a year for 1 million streams, which is not fair. And, people in the pandemic, especially with all the musicians who work day jobs because they can't make a living as musicians, when they all lost their day jobs too, then they started looking at that Spotify revenue and they're like, something is really wrong here, you know?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because so we're not doing this piece, but we'll eventually do it. And with Lenin, in his piece, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, he mentions this phenomenon he calls it horizontal and vertical integration, as in to form monopolies. So what happened, a horizontal firm, he used steel as an example, but it seems like even when you don't have something concrete like steel, literally the same thing happens with music. So they consolidate horizontally, as in record companies buy other record companies. And so that's the horizontal integration. Vertical integration is when the distributor buys the record company, and that's how you get monopoly power. And it's funny, I didn't even realize that it also, so Lenin's, that's amazing. So you don't even need industry to, right. Wow, that's
all these same things are happening with big tech. Yeah. With all these industries, and it's across the board in so many industries, and it's fascinating. Yeah. There's a book called The Death of the Artist that lays it out in each industry. I'm very familiar with what's going on with music, but this same thing is happening with taxi drivers and food delivery. And,
I see.
I mean, it just goes on and on. Writers, journalism. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of some of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, the only arts industry that's thriving, in a sense, is television. But even in television, people are being paid 50% of what they used to get 20 years ago for just about any job in TV today. You're making half what you used to make, but at least there's a lot of content being created, so there's a lot of people employed. I mean, basically, if you're a musician today and you want to actually make any money other than from crowdfunding on Patreon, your only hope is to sell songs for TV shows. That's where the money is.
So is there a second song you'd like to play for us?
Oh, sure. Since the virus arrived, a year since in this country 500,000 died, a year since all the borders were starting to be sealed, a year since the hospitals were sprouting in the fields. No question for anyone living around here, it's been a year. It's been a year since the cafes all closed, since the dates on the calendars froze, as the windows turned to plywood and the plywood turned to art, and unless you were essential or worked in the food cart, then you just had to cope with the anxiety and fear. It's been a year. It's been a year since the wheels in motion led to an uprising on each side of the ocean, exposed by the pandemic, by inequality, by 846 of the neck beneath the knee. A time of counter demos, for a while a coup seemed near. It's been a year. It's been a year since canceling the rent, a year since the last of the money was spent, since so many saw we're all vectors for disease and there is such a thing as society, since the word mutual aid became ones you'll commonly hear, along with grim milestone. It's been a year. It's been a year. It's been a year.
And I just became your latest patron. It is amazing. I love this song. It's so, I love it. You're very, I hadn't heard this song. I hadn't heard. I heard something about the West Virginia mountain people. You were one of your. I love that song too.
Battle of Blair Mountain. Oh,
is that the one? Okay, so I've heard a lot of your songs, but I don't know the names sometimes.
Nice. That's always good. That's always a really good sign. When people hear your songs, but they don't know, where they heard them or what the names are and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay. So let's start with the thing that I like. Let's start with the piece called "The Poverty." Let's start with "The Poverty of the People's Teachers." So "People's Teachers" is Lenin's way of saying public schools, and then can you start reading, if I may ask?
The second one, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Let me send you. You have the link?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
This one, literally, I believe that's basically what you need. And he mentions certain places, and we'll put a map up for you to understand. A gubernia is like a state. No, not quite a state. Maybe it's not. It's like like a county, I guess. And they're different areas. So we'll just put up a map of all the gubernias he mentions here in this piece. So go ahead.
V.I. Lenin, The Poverty of the People's Teachers. Mm-hmm. In view of the All-Russia Congress on Public Education to be held in December, it is appropriate that we should turn our attention to an old question, which is perpetually new: the poverty of the people's teachers. We have before us Volume 1 of the one-day census of primary schools in the Empire. The volume has been published by the Ministry of Public, what you might call... by the well-known statistician.
Dave, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, so do you interrupt now and
no, wait for me to stop laughing.
Got it.
Because he's right. He's like, if you can call it that, education. And it reminds me just of the U.S. And last week, one of my old tweets went viral where it said something like, what was it? Indians moved west after the Puritans moved. And so that's, it was, and then so when I said public, it just made me laugh.
In U-Hauls. Yeah, they got their U-Hauls and yeah.
And okay, go ahead. So let's start with the volume has been published.
The volume has been published by the Ministry of Public, what you might call education.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It is signed by the well-known statistician, Mr. V.I. Pokrovsky. The bureaucratic character of this official work, bureaucratic and official in the worst sense of the words, instantly leaps to the eye.
Go ahead. Okay.
The census was taken on January 18th, 1911. It took all of 2 years to publish its first volume, dealing only with the
gubernias.
Gubernias, excellent. I'm looking that one up.
Oh, that just means county.
Oh, county. Oh, you said that. That's right. Gubernias of the St. Petersburg Academic District.
The capital back then.
The capital. The only thing we seem to be able to do in our country without tedious, agonizing red tape is to pass laws like the law against the press.
Okay, this just... the only thing we need to change is the date. If we said January 18th and add 100 years, literally... I bet you there's a St. Petersburg Academic District in this country, so everything else is the same, right?
Florida.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We need to change that. We need to do a petition to change St. Petersburg, Florida to Leningrad.
That'll go over really well.
Yeah, it should.
Especially
I once did the funny petition that went trolley where we decided where we said that we're going to replace all Confederate soldiers with Che Guevara.
Che Guevara, yeah.
Yeah, we should. I said we should replace all Confederate statues
with Che Guevara statues.
Yeah,
I love it. That would be so great.
Yeah. So, exactly what it reminds me of is that somehow you can pass the Patriot Act right the next day after 9/11, but you can't pass Medicare for all the next day after a pandemic. Go figure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, let's see, where were we here?
As in the practice.
As in the practice, the census program was repeatedly discussed throughout 1910 by a host of official cabinets and conferences, each of which did something to spoil it.
That reminds me just of how Obamacare's discussions went.
Yep.
So the greatest thing about Lenin is that he's funny. He's hilarious, and it's like impossible to get through some of his pieces without like rolling down in laughter.
It's wonderful, dry humor, the way he writes. Yeah,
he has the old-fashioned Russian.
Chomsky, yeah.
We don't talk of that man here.
I love Chomsky, but
like I said, we do not mention the C word here.
As a result, for instance, there is only one head, Russian language, on the question of the pupil's mother tongue. It is clearly prohibited to make the subdivision into Belarusian, Little Russian, Ukrainian, and Great Russian. As a result, the census of the schools of the empire does not include a number of schools, such as the urban schools set up under the 1872 statute, private first and second category schools.
So the private first and so those are like the fancy schools in Manhattan. The ones I forgot. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. But in Manhattan, we have all these super fancy schools where investment bankers send their kids. That's what it reminds me of.
Do they call them academies?
Yes. Yes.
Academies. Like, it's a high school, right? No, academy.
Exactly. Yeah. Go ahead.
It is prohibited to collect full data. Mm-hmm. It is prohibited to know the truth about the language spoken by the pupils at home. It is prohibited to make a comparison between public and private schools. The man who compiled these statistics, Mr. Pokrovsky, much vaunted by the liberals, has done his bit to spoil the census returns. Thus, material has been separately collected on each teacher relative to the size of salary. It is, naturally, important to know the truth on such a burning question as the poverty of the people's teachers. It is important to know just how many masters and mistresses are receiving the desperately low, the very lowest, the very low, and the low salaries in general. The material on this has been collected. The information on it is there. But our liberal statistician processes it in such a way as to cover up the unsavory truth. Our statistician merely informs us of the average salaries of masters and mistresses by gubernia and the different categories of schools.
So that is, he means school principals.
The official classifications are scrupulously observed. But anyone who wants to know the truth is not interested in which gubernia and in which category of schools the teachers starve, but how many teachers are starving and living in poverty.
Sorry, just give me a second. That just hit me. Sorry, I did not expect that. Sorry. But anyone who knows the truth is not. It just hit me. The way you made it, like I didn't expect the word after teachers to be starved. Because
right. It's just give me a second. Humor again.
Yeah. And in Oklahoma, I saw a viral video a few years ago. Of teachers is it blood or selling
blood plasma?
Okay, so selling plasma in order to survive. So our teachers are starving. Okay, go ahead.
It was quite possible to determine from the returns of the census how many teachers are being paid starvation salaries, say under 360 rubles.
$120. Sorry, not 120. 100. No, what's 360 divided by 2?
Oh.
Whatever, just divide it by 2 for this. It should be good enough. Okay, go ahead.
And this should unquestionably have been done.
A year, by the way. Lenin means but a year, not a month. Go ahead.
But it has not been done. It has been buried in the hundreds of thousands of cards at the archives. What the public has been informed of is only the officially purged and officially embellished averages of salaries by category and gubernia. Need we say, too, that the liberal statisticians made a point of concealing from the public what percentage of the starving teachers have families?
Hold on. Let me explain what they did. So everyone knows, this is probably the true in America. I'm not 100% certain, so I won't say this. But the school principals, a schoolmaster is the same as a principal or a schoolmistress. And the school principal, what they did was they interviewed a lot of school principals. And so when you just use all these school principals and not the ordinary teacher, it makes it look like the teacher's salary was not starvation wage. But Lenin's like, no, look at how they gather the data. They only they put a lot of, so that you can never collect the data of everything. So the best that statisticians can do is collect samples and hope that they're honest statisticians, such that the sample is representative of the overall population. And so Lenin's saying that the Tsar rigged the poll the statistics so that to make it look like the teachers were not getting paid starvation wages when they interviewed just the principals, majority, and some teachers. Go ahead.
These average figures show that a school mistress in the St. Petersburg Academic District receives 433 rubles a year.
That's that's $200 and something a year. Go ahead.
And a schoolmaster, is that in those at that time or it's
starvation
dollars of the time?
Okay, you divided. Okay, so let me just pull out a calculator because my brain's not working today.
But when you say half of the rubles and you get dollars, are we getting dollars of the early 20th century?
It's from that date, from 1913. Right. It's $216 a year for teachers, or no, for principals, and for principals, and then the teachers get even less.
And a schoolmaster, 376 rubles. But most of the teachers are in the countryside. Their average salaries are 347 rubles for the schoolmistress and 367 rubles for the schoolmaster. Let us note that the overall number of schoolmistresses is double that of schoolmasters. So, most of the teachers of the St. Petersburg district are outside St. Petersburg gubernia. The salaries of schoolmistresses are Olonets gubernia, 375 rubles.
A year.
Novgorod, 358 rubles.
A year.
Vologda, 320.
A year.
Archangel gubernia, 319 rubles.
A year.
Pskov gubernia, 312 rubles.
A year. Go ahead.
Even these figures, which put a gloss on reality, make it clear that the majority of schoolmistresses are paid a starvation salary. With the present high cost of living, the 26 to 30 rubles a month for schoolmistresses, of whom...
That's $15 a month back then.
11.5% are married and 4.4% are widows, is undoubtedly a beggarly salary, which condemns teachers to starvation and indigence. From the category data, we find that 2,180 schoolmistresses worked in parish one-class schools in the St. Petersburg Academic District with a total of 7,693 schoolmistresses. Consequently, we have here a category with a highly impressive number of teachers. What then are they paid? An average of 302 rubles in the towns.
A year.
And 301 rubles in
a year.
The Russian state spends hundreds of millions of rubles on the maintenance of its civil service, the police, the army, etc., while dooming teachers in the people's schools to starvation.
That sounds incredibly familiar to you. I don't know. Like, is there another country that does that?
Mm-hmm.
David, can you think of another? Do you prefer Dave or David?
Either. But yeah, there are just so many. There are so many parallels between things that were happening in Russia 100 years ago and what's going on now.
I know. The starvation. The last part where it's the czar. It's like they spent so much money on the army, so much money on the police, and the teachers starve. And I'm like, Jesus, that's nothing has changed. Go ahead.
No. But when we really need to bail people out, when they're feeling threatened, they can come up with $1.9 trillion. But otherwise, we only can afford to pay the military.
Go ahead. Let's finish the sentence.
The bourgeoisie sympathizes with public education.
Sorry, that exactly is like the Democratic Party. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With the proviso, however, that the teachers live in worse conditions than the servants in the manor houses and the houses of the rich.
Yes, there's nothing we need to change.
Yep. No, it's just so
on point.
I mean, it's so. There's so much about reading history. I'm sure you agree that it's just so like you wonder like where am I? Like what time zone? What year am I in? Oh yeah, 2021. Right. Okay. No, I mean, it's just so familiar.
It is, and it's because of capitalism, and so this shows you that. One thing that Americans have the worst thing is the disease of American exceptionalism, where they think a lot of people like I started this show because for so many people I kept on like I was acting like a nagging aunt. They would say something about the Democratic Party, and I was like, you have to read Lenin, and you'll know this is what happens next. And it seems like, and for them it was they couldn't trust. I guess they couldn't trust me enough to just pick a Google Lenin and click on a piece and read it. Like the minute you read it, you'll realize how this is applicable to the 20th to today. But they couldn't do that. So I started this show because I didn't want to be a nagging aunt every time somebody makes a dumb comment on Twitter.
You better just start a show, and that way they can watch it or ignore it, and then you don't have to upset all your friends by nagging them on Twitter. Is that that's why I start shows. Like, okay, then if people really want this education, they can get it, and otherwise, I don't want to argue with them on social media. At least I don't. I can't.
Well, the thing is that because Americans have been indoctrinated to American supremacy, where they think America is so unique and special and exceptional, their mind cannot get over their mind. So all they need to do is think America's a country under capitalism. And so what if Lenin is critiquing capitalism, maybe there's some phenomenons that occur because it's a system, right? For example, if capitalism, for example, if you build a factory in Russia to make steel beams, and if you build a factory in California to make steel beams, the factories will always output the same steel beam, regardless of what year and whether it's in Russia or California. So the idea is that this government system under capitalism is kind of like that, in that you'll see that because the government's purpose is to preserve capitalism, they end up doing these same actions. And there's a lot of parallels. And if there's one person we know who knows how to defeat capitalism, that is Lenin, right?
That definitely they did a pretty good job of defeating capitalism. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, so that's so you're just learning from somebody who has done this before, who knows how to do it, who's been so kind as to write everything that he's done every moment of the day for 30 years into his collected work. So you can so the thing is, the reason why we need to read it is because we have to learn what he did from reading it, because he's not going to have a recipe. It's how to get a socialist dictatorship of the proletariat. Dictatorship. Help me pronounce that word, somebody.
Dictatorship of the proletariat.
Yes, that one. That's a hard one.
It's a hard one. It's a Latin word, long Latin word, as Pete Seeger said.
Yes. So we'll just call it DOTP. To get the DOTP.
That's even worse.
Oh, is it even worse?
Now you're doing the acronym. I mean, taking a long Latin word and turning it. I mean, that's kind of like the opposite, but sort of problematic. And anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just can't. I don't want to figure out I don't want to be embarrassed every time I mispronounce that word, proletariat. Did I pronounce it right?
You could say working class.
Okay, so let me just do that.
Maybe that's too modern. I don't know.
Let's just okay. Dictatorship of the poor people. A poor people's dictatorship. That's it.
The 99%?
No, the poor people's dictatorship. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. The poor dictatorship. Okay. No, that's
roll off the tongue.
No, the poor dictator. No,
it's not something you really want to join.
Yeah. Okay. So we know the dictatorship of the proletariat sounds awesome, as in, oh my God, I'm a member of the proletariat and I get to be dictator, right?
I mean, it sounds more tough than poor dictatorship anyway.
Exactly. No, okay. Yeah, no,
if you want it sounds tough, yeah.
It excites people because they're like, oh my God, I get to be the dictator and and so I like that. Okay. Let's just call him. Okay. So Karl Marx was right. I was wrong. No surprise. But back to the point of Americans. So for them, they cannot get there. All they have to do is just go and pick and click on any random piece and read it. And you could see the similar, you just have to change the years. But a lot of Americans just can't get the idea that they're not that unique, and like a tyranny under capitalism is always a tyranny under capitalism, and they'll kind of act the same way. So they don't understand that that by learning Lenin, you learn how to get a socialist utopia. And of course, capitalist propaganda will be like, okay, this is what really irritates me when Americans act really crazy and they're like, oh my God, Stalin killed 100 million, billion, trillion, gazillion people. It's like, no, are you going to trust the word? Okay. In America, corporations are people, my friend. So if Stalin, and these people are telling you Stalin killed blah, 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 100,000 million I believe. So basically they mean dollars, by the way, is what I try to tell them. Like, what I don't understand is that they see that how Bernie was defamed by the media, the corporate media, right? And so they can't make that logical leap that, oh, anybody who wins will always be a villain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, though, I mean, certainly authoritarianism is something a lot of people associate
authoritarianism is
with.
Okay, authoritarianism. Okay, this is actually a great topic. Like, authoritarianism for whom? So, for example, Lenin, one of his first decrees was to overtake all the monasteries and put homeless children in. So, and if you cry, like okay, that was unfair for me to assume that a Catholic priest might be a pedophile in Tsarist Russia, but I think it's okay to make that.
Few of them.
Yeah, I mean, let's just make that logical leap. It's probably okay, right, with that fact checking?
Probably not much of a leap.
Okay. So, so if you're going to ask the pedophile priest, what's authoritarianism? He'll be like, oh my God, they kicked me out of my monastery and they kicked me out of the monastery and made me, I don't know. And then, but then the capitalist propaganda will tell you that they kicked out this pedophile priest out of his monastery. But capitalist propaganda will never tell you to put in homeless children. And then all these, I'm sorry, Janet, what should I call the Twitter A-word crowds?
Your anarch crowd?
Let's just call them that, anarchs. They're just like, oh my God, the Soviet Union was authoritarian. And then and then I'm like, no, you're repeating CIA propaganda. And they're like, no, that's like how, and then some people think that, oh, communists call everyone a Nazi. And we're like, no. When we're not like right wingers. When I call somebody a Nazi, I mean that they were soldiers who fought for Hitler in the World War II. And so it's kind of what they, I don't know. What is this? Is there any way we can like explain this phenomenon where they make bad assumptions based on what they know without actually checking? What do you call this?
I mean, the basic phenomena, I mean, on a broader level, the kind of thing you're talking about is so common because people get educated in the schools and by the media here.
Public and education, if you can call it that.
Yeah, if you can
that's going to be our Lenin insult for the day.
And if you go about your life without systematically unlearning a lot of the stuff that you learn in school, then, or in the media or wherever else, then you end up basically, I mean, naturally, more or less, assuming that you know something, about that because you learned it, and then if you don't unlearn it, right, then you think you know something, right? And then that's very dangerous because, of course, a little knowledge is a very dangerous thing. And when you look into it more by actually, educating yourself rather than, using these textbooks written by capitalists, and you get real thorough background on real history, then that's dangerous and it's very valuable, and that's why
how did you start
popular education?
How did you start your unlearning?
I mean, I was raised by by thinking people, so it was it's also raised in the midst of Republicanville, during in my youth, Reagan was president, and
Gaddafi called. I'm going to put this clip. It's in Arabic, and I can't find subtitles, but it just you'll hear the word second. You'll hear the word Hitler and Reagan, and Gaddafi's calling him the second Hitler. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you can sure see why Gaddafi wouldn't have liked Reagan. That was awful. It was a friend of mine whose cousin.
What did he do to Libya?
Yeah, a friend of mine's cousin was almost killed, and her whole family was killed in the bombing of Libya, in Reagan's bombing of Libya in 1986. And my friend's cousin survived as a child during the bombing of Tripoli because she was sheltered by a door that fell over her and protected her from the collapsed building.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And so how did you, so then what happened with your unlearning?
Well, it was a process that really, for me, it really began with the 3 Mile Island nuclear meltdown in Pennsylvania when I was 10 years old, I guess. And, they were telling us, well, you don't drink the milk because it's radioactive. And that scared me. And then I started looking into into nuclear power. And then that got me into learning about the nuclear arms race and how much our military budget was. So it was like a slippery slope. But then, I was like, that was the beginning of it for me, was anti-militarism and anti-nuclear.
Actually, for me, it was the identical thing. What happened is that I was lucky in that my parents are Indian and my dad does a lot of work in economics and finance, not economics, but who cares? But because he had to work both in India and America, like I spent so much time in India. And then one time he would take me out on a survey, and there was this older lady in this village, and she was, this was way back then, and she was like telling us about the time under the British rule. And then she said something about, then they formed the IMF and we stopped having food come here to the village or something like that. And I was like, what? What's the IMF? And then I learned about it, and then I got even more and more and more angry. And so it's the same thing. I did not realize that it's not just war, but there's a second kind of, can we call it, is the IMF a warfare organization, you think?
I would say so. It's economic warfare, and the IMF and the World Bank for me was, I was very much involved with the global justice movement, largely as a musician, but also
at the WTO.
I wasn't at the WTO. I was in Germany at the time, but I was at a lot of other protests against the IMF and the World Bank in Europe and in the United States and Canada and all over the world. And the IMF, and people really need to know this, and they also, and I think people also really need to know that China is a big loaner of money and has completely different practices in their money loaning, of completely different, much more. Also, Venezuela for a while was doing a lot of money lending, completely different model.
Oh, hence the sanctions. That makes sense.
The sanctions, which is
because they were lending money to other countries. They want to devaluate their. Oh my God,
That's right. And the IMF was horrified by what Venezuela largely, the Bank of the South, Venezuela's Bank of the South, largely liberated much of Latin America from the tyranny of the IMF. And that's why, that's one of the main reasons why the government of Venezuela, is so hated by the United States. And the IMF, their whole thing was with strings attached to all their loans. And so, they loan money to countries supposedly to develop them. And then, of course, the point is that the reason why they're loaning the money is to structurally get them dependent on, so they sell off their industry to the private sector. So they have no source of income from public utilities anymore. What they did to Iraq, the privatization of Iraq under the gun. Paul Wolfowitz, who I also wrote a song about, he used to be the director of the World Bank, and then he goes to be appointed by Bush to run the occupation of Iraq. And it's perfect because it says everything about what finance, capital, what capitalism is all about. It's all about controlling the world, and through military means or through economic means, they'll take either way. But Paul Wolfowitz, his appointment to run the occupation of Iraq after being the head of the World Bank was so poetic that I had to write a song about it.
He's done giving orders to generals. He's moved to another sphere. He's through with ordering the tanks to kill. He's gonna do something different this year. He's moving from Virginia to Washington with a neocon to thank. He's through with the War Department, now he's gonna run the World Bank. He said he'd be true to the mission, that hunger and want should end. And as all Afghans know, he's a man of his word, on that we can't depend. So be prepared for prosperity, it's coming to your door. Cause there will be no poverty once we kill off all the poor. Last week he was bombing cities, now he's a financier. Pay your debts or say goodbye, Paul Wolfowitz is here. He'll bring the world things it needs,
such as nuclear-powered giant dams and hamburgers. No doubt he's a man of the hour. He's proven it over and over with finesse and aplomb. And for those who disagree, well, then he's got the bomb. Last week he was bombing cities, now he's a financier. Pay your debts or say goodbye, Paul Wolfowitz is here. He's a real American, so he must know best. He'll lead us to glory on this many can attest. He'll lead us to freedom, and we will be so glad. Just like those shoppers in that market in downtown Baghdad. Last week he was bombing cities, now he's a financier. Pay your debts or say goodbye, Paul Wolfowitz is here.
Okay. So now, thank you so much, David, for the amazing song. And I love the way that it lets us in on the secret of whatever the de-bathification, like, you know, that they're not getting rid of bathtubs. But because when I think de-bathification, I think, oh, are they getting rid of bathtubs in Iraq? And no, that's not it. They're privatizing everything. And I believe there's another word for it. Looting? Is that a good word?
Carpetbagging.
Is looting a good word?
Looting,
Heist?
absolutely.
So I love this.
Getting rid of all vestiges of the old, basically, you know, all the vestiges of socialist institutions that were developed under the Ba'ath Party in Iraq and Syria and other countries, you know, where of course you had, you know, universal education of women through graduate school and all sorts of other things that, you know, people would be surprised to know were happening in Iraq in the 1970s.
Okay, well, even worse than that, in the I can't remember if it's 1950s or 60s, either way, it doesn't matter, but Iraq used to have a monarchy. And then Abdul Karim al-Qasim, he was such a good man that he did not want to raise sectarian tensions, so he only prayed in private, so that no one would know if he was a Sunni or a Shia. Anyways, he was democratically elected, and then first thing he did was go out and put a peace envoy to the Kurds and offered them land. Then he nationalized the oil fields, and then the CIA shot him and installed Saddam Hussein. So, and what you can see is that there's a moment of hope where the life expectancy in Iraq shoots up, and it goes like this, and that always breaks my heart. And with Congo too, you can see there's a moment of hope where the life expectancy goes up. You're like Patrice Lumumba, shot by the CIA. When Lenin wrote the piece about the armaments industry, they were on the brink of a world war. And often people are confused because they really don't know what started the world war. And that's the problem, is that when you have 4 inbred royal cousins, they're going to start world wars over colonies, right?
And there was an arms race going on too.
Exactly. And so this should be familiar, except the thing is that the weapons are more dangerous today. Actually, let's just read it and we'll see this.
V.I. Lenin, Armaments and Capitalism. Is
sorry, I read the first sentence. I'm sorry.
Just the title is funny?
No. I read the first sentence till the end, and then that made you laugh. Okay, sorry.
Oh, okay. We haven't gotten there yet. Britain is one of the richest, freest, and most advanced countries in the world.
Sorry, I like the richest and freest.
Freest.
Go ahead. But yeah, when you mentioned go ahead.
He may be being facetious.
Yeah, he's very facetious. Go ahead.
The armaments fever has long afflicted British society.
Society, in quotation marks.
Well, he and Thatcher would agree on that then, maybe, about there not being such a thing as society.
Correct.
And the British government, in exactly the same way as it has the French, German, and other governments. Actually,
I have a really funny anecdote, and I'm not 100% sure if it was Gandhi, but he was an Indian freedom fighter. And some Western journalist asked, what do you think of Western civilization? And he responded with, it would be a great idea to develop that for the future.
I love his response. It was like, they didn't miss a beat. You know, what do you think of Western civilization? It'd be a very good idea.
No, he said, I think he said something about, somebody said, it's a great.
Should try that sometime.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
And now the British press, particularly the Labour press, is publishing very interesting data which reveal the ingenious capitalist mechanics of arms manufacture, in quotes. Britain's naval armaments are particularly great. I think the use of the word great, maybe, because it's Great Britain. I don't know.
Alex.
Britain's shipyards, Vickers, Armstrong, Brown, and others, are world famous. Hundreds and thousands of millions of rubles are being spent by Britain and other countries on war preparations. And of course, it is all being done exclusively in the interest of peace, for the preservation of culture, in the interests of the country, civilization, etc. And we find that admirals and prominent statesmen of both parties, conservative and liberal, are shareholders and directors of shipyards and of gunpowder, dynamite, ordnance, and other factories.
Does that sound? Who knows what corporation the Secretary of Defense works for? Raytheon. This sounds so familiar. Go ahead.
A shower of gold is pouring straight into the pockets of bourgeois politicians who have got together in an exclusive international gang engaged in instigating an armaments race among the peoples and fleecing these trustful, stupid, dull, and submissive peoples like sheep. Armaments are considered a national matter, a matter of patriotism. Interesting.
Okay. Very interesting. Go ahead.
It is presumed that everyone maintains secrecy.
NSA? Anyone? What is it? Classified. Go ahead.
Loose lips sink ships. I think that was. But the shipyards, the ordnance, dynamite, and small arms factories are international enterprises in which the capitalists of the various countries work together in duping and fleecing the public of the various countries and making ships and guns alike for Britain against Italy and for Italy against Britain.
And look up Northrop Grumman's client list, and you'll see sometimes, they do supply both sides of the war.
And if the Ford Motor Company had lots of factories in Germany during the Second World War, and they changed the name to Opel.
That's where Opel
came from. And Fanta was because Coca-Cola had factories in Germany, and they changed their soda name to Fanta because they didn't think Germans would want to buy Coke because it was associated with the US. So they just kept on selling it under the name Fanta.
Go ahead.
And lots of other nice examples. Okay. Where were we at?
And ingenious.
An ingenious capitalist setup, civilization, law and order, culture, peace, and hundreds of millions of rubles being plundered by capitalist businessmen and swindlers in shipbuilding, dynamite manufacture, etc.
And now we also have airplanes that don't fly or that can't actually shoot. Like we'll put the link there in the video, but yeah, exact same situation, but it's just bigger now because we have an Air Force that Lenin didn't have back then. They didn't have airplanes back then, but now they do.
Britain is a member of the Triple Entente, which is hostile to the Triple Alliance. Italy is a member of the Triple Alliance. The well-known firm of Vickers, Britain, has branches in Italy. The shareholders and directors of this firm, through the venal press and through venal parliamentary figures.
Oh my God. Actually, I take this back. Every week we have a Lenin insult. Venal press sounds like a nice STD.
Venal.
Yeah. So we're going to call press, Washington Post is a venal press. And
nobody uses the word venal anymore.
I know. I love it. It sounds like an STD, right?
It does. It sounds very much like an STD. It sounds like you don't want to call anything venal. That sounds horrible.
No, we want to call the Washington Post venal.
Yeah, I guess, maybe it's a good word to use.
It's a great word to use.
Because it does sound so,
I don't know. Well, what does the word venal mean?
I don't know, but now I need to look it up. It sounds like it must be related to venereal. I don't know. If it's not related to venereal, I'll be surprised at this point. But now it's all stuck in my head. Okay.
Venal means showing or motivated. Okay. Showing or motivated by susceptibility to bribery.
To bribe? Oh, interesting.
I did not know that. Okay, so it's not an STD. No. Well, it is an STD in my case.
It is.
No, it is absolutely an STD. Okay.
It's definitely a disease.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. And profit is taken from both the workers of Britain and those of Italy, and people are fleeced in both countries. Yeah. Conservative and liberal cabinet ministers and members of parliament are almost all shareholders in these firms.
Yes. We have a Secretary of Defense that was Raytheon, and the one before was, I forgot, some other defense contractor. Go ahead. And then Halliburton.
And most of the members of the U.S. Congress are millionaires. And if they're not invested in defense companies, I mean, they might as well be. I'm sure they are mostly.
Yeah, they probably are. Go ahead.
They work hand in glove. The son of the great liberal minister Gladstone is a director of the Armstrong.
Go ahead.
Rear Admiral Bacon, the celebrated naval specialist and a high official at the Admiralty, has been appointed to a post at an ordnance works in Coventry at a salary of £7,000, over 60,000 rubles. Wow. The salary of the British Prime Minister is £5,000, about 45,000 rubles. The same thing, of course, takes place in all capitalist countries. Governments manage the affairs of the capitalist class, and the managers are well paid. The managers are shareholders themselves, and they shear the sheep together under cover of speeches about patriotism.
Wow.
Eloquent. So eloquent. Yeah.
And he's
That's a great paragraph. That paragraph, that's like a poem right there.
You think so?
I mean, that paragraph, absolutely. I mean, well, yeah, I've always thought Lenin was eloquent. Absolutely. I mean, he's a great writer. Great.
So,
Engels,
but to me, I was
totally obtuse. I mean,
so what I
the
didn't.
Communist Manifesto was so well written, but like Capital, I can't get through the first 10 pages. So but I'm not an economist. So.
Okay. So what I really like is that, yes, under the cover, there's nothing that we just have to change the country to America and multiply the numbers by like 10 million or something, and everything's the same, right?
Totally.
And
absolutely. And it's the same now as it was 100 years ago. And the same stuff is going on. And, just like what J.P. Morgan said, I think almost 200 years ago, I can employ half the working class to kill the other half of the working class. So why should I worry about, rebellions and such? I don't know. That's I'm paraphrasing. But.
Yeah, he said so. But the answer is simple. The half of the working class gets together with the other half and get rid of J.P. Morgan. I mean, get rid of millionaires and oops.
And it has to be international. I think that's the key.
Yes, Americans do not understand. The problem with Americans is that I spoke about this so many times. The reason why we don't have labor laws anymore is because of the AFL-CIO. I can't remember. Is it called CIA or CIO?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, they were very supportive of the AFL-CIO was very supportive of CIA-backed unions in Chile during the overthrow of Pinochet.
That's why I always like sometimes when I accidentally type AFL-CIA.
Yeah,
it's like so confusing to keep those two separate. Anyways. What happened is that they actually thought that they thought they had made a deal with management where American workers get a decent wage in exchange for like killing everything that moves in Cambodia. But guess what? The chicken came home to roost, and Ronald Reagan happened. So Americans really need to absolutely understand imperialism and become internationalists. Because last time not fighting imperialism is what caused the downfall of everything, right?
Absolutely. And also, I mean, especially in light of events of the past year, it should be stated in very, very certain terms that divide and rule of the working class is also, of course, there's the nationalism and patriotism and exceptionalism is such a massive problem in unifying the working class because any unification of the working class must be international or it's pointless.
But hold on, but when we mean unification of international class, it does not mean we want white people to be like, hold on, let me just finish. It does not mean we want white people to be like, China's a dictatorship and an Uyghur genocide or whatever. No, you're not wanted at that point. Internationalism is you going and learning from China, learning from Bolivia, learning from even Australia. Everyone in every country in the world, even the very capital, their left does a better job than this. So it's going to be about you basically saying, I don't know anything. I'm going to learn from my brothers and sisters abroad. So it's not going to be about you like repeating State Department propaganda about Uyghur genocide or incubator babies or whatever is going on. And we don't want to hear the A word. Authoritarianism is good. And okay, so the reason why
Authoritarianism is good. I mean, I'm not going to agree with that. So, but you know,
I'm saying no. This is okay. The problem is that Twitter.
I'm not sure where the Uyghur genocide or whatever comes. No,
I'm sorry.
It's not related to what I.
I mean, I don't mean authoritarianism is actually good, but I mean that on Twitter, anarchists sometimes, anarchs often like use the word authoritarianism, and they don't really know what's going on. So that's why it was just me being facetious, if that makes sense.
I understand.
Okay, hold on. Can I just finish this? Just one second. I'm so sorry. So authoritarianism is good, and you need to remember that. And the reason why, for example, last night somebody was like, "Oh my God," I said DPRK committed lots of crime on Twitter, and then I asked which one, and then they said, "Oh, they kidnapped." Was it ethnic Japanese or Japanese civilian? I can't remember. They kidnapped Japanese civilians in the 1960s. And I'm like, I wonder what. And then to me, it was like, oh, okay. So I know that they meant like fascist war criminals, but this person did, and all he needed to do was just like think for a second, assume that the DPRK was logical. Why would you need to kidnap Japanese Nazis? Okay. Right. But then he didn't even understand what he was saying. And so it just takes a minute. And the reason why Americans keep messing up on this is because they just assume irrational authoritarian as opposed to logical actor, and literally takes 30 seconds. Well, if he had assumed that North Korea was logical and just took 30 seconds to just think about it, you'd be like, oh, which side of the war was, and which side of the war, you'd understand this. And that how it's probably a public service and not a crime. But so that's what I was talking about, is that, so yes, internationalism is very important. So go ahead. Sorry to go on from the tangent.
It's especially important because the working class has a tendency of being used in many different countries by their governments to kill each other in wars, right? In the United States and France and the United Kingdom, but most notably the United States in the modern period has a horrible tendency of using their working class to slaughter the members of other societies, you know. And this is the problem. There is one, I mean, among other things, is the education, the nationalism. Of course, that's not the problem.
Education.
Yeah, I mean, education in quotes. With the leadership, of course, they're imperialists, but with the people that they get to serve their interests, it's a much more complicated picture of propaganda and miseducation and misinformation and all this. But another thing that I think is equally important to note is the divisions within the society, and that are also used, as particularly race and class divisions that are used by the ruling class to keep the population divided. And this is also, the kind of forward motion that is necessary.
Absolutely. So I've been trying to raise the consciousness to make Americans into international solidarists. No, I hate that. Oh God, they're doing that word too. Okay.
Can I just say your references to Americans, while I completely understand where you're coming from coming from outside the country. I mean, this is a country that's, this is the country you've been watching on TV where people are burning down large amounts of neighborhoods in lots of cities throughout the country. It's a very diverse country. I mean, it's not just brainwashed nationalists.
Those are in power. Those are in the media.
People here,
No. But the problem is that those are in that. So you have to remember that the media and the power is filled with brainwash. Like most of the journalists in New York Times, if they knew, they probably wouldn't be working in the New York Times, but they are. So you have to remember that your source of information about the world comes from brainwashed nationalists. Does that make sense?
Well, whose source?
Okay. So if I was just Google News in America and I pulled up a New York Times article, the person writing it is going to be a brain. That's what I was saying.
What you're going to get. Right.
So you have to correct for that first, is what I'm trying to tell people. Does that make sense?
Right. Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're brainwashed. So the person Chuck Todd is a brainwashed nationalist, but you have to remember that he's the guy giving you information, so you can't take anything he says seriously. He says half the story is what I was trying to say.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm sorry. I didn't mean by Americans. I meant how by Americans, I mean American politicians, the elite, whatever, the sources of your information is filled with brainwashed nationalists.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's. I mean, it's absolutely true, and that's why we need so much more popular education in so many different forms. I mean, among other things, people need to understand what the real history is and what the real situation is, and in order to have any chance of moving forward in any possible way from this nightmare of capitalism and imperialism and homelessness and millions of people being killed in wars constantly. And, of course, Biden comes to power. And the first thing, I mean, even before he comes to power, he's finishing all his speeches with "God bless our troops." I mean, you can see where this guy's coming from. He's immediately and of course, they're always talking about gridlock in Congress, but they always easily agree on another $700 billion for the military every year.
But yet there's never good luck about bombing places.
Never. Well, never about spending money on the military and any kind of, if there's any dissent around bombing places, it's
always not enough to change them.
Never enough.
Not bomb.
Yeah. Right. And if it's never enough, and then if it might be enough, then of course suddenly a few people change their opinions, and then the pro-war Yeah,
this always breaks my heart. Bernie Sanders got, I think, 4 Republicans about the Yemen war. Suddenly, you got 6 Democrats defecting.
I mean, they loved to criticize the Yemen war when they weren't running the White House and when they weren't in a position to stop it as much as they are now. But they now that they're in the majority, you'll see, and you can already see all their positions on everything changing. And you can already see all the Democratic leadership, mainstream especially, basically doing everything they possibly can to try to calm down everybody who's been protesting and tell them all, everything's going to be fine. And, through their typical combination of you're here, we'll give you some money, but also, join us in our, God bless the troops again. And then let's go start a war with China or Russia or whoever they want to start a war with next. I mean, that's absolutely madness. I mean, of course, and the pandemic is still going on, and he's spent, and Biden is, not that it would be any less unforgivable without a pandemic for him to be talking or doing the things that he's planning on doing or gosh, I mean, it's just this whole thing, the way that they can sell this whole idea that China is somehow a country that needs to be confronted. I mean, it's just such madness. And I don't think they do a very good job of even coming up with, real excuses for it.
I have a really funny, this actually shows me, I'm just going to, go ahead. I'll bring up this really funny news article. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Okay. Before we go, I'm going to have one final song, but I have to show this really funny news article that we're going to pop up, but I'll read it. No, this. Now, do you see it?
China using sea to hide submarines. What the hell are you supposed to do with a submarine?
Apparently not hide it under the sea.
Not have it being submarine. Okay.
Yeah, so this is an act. I believe this was, see, everyone made fun of it.
What paper is this?
Okay, hold on. Look at this.
The New Zealand Herald.
No, New Zealand, it was in an American newspaper. New Zealand Herald took it because it was such a ridiculous headline that they're mocking it.
Oh, that's fantastic. China may be using the sea to hide its submarines.
Yes, and they're using it in and then my favorite is when they're like, China's, I'll show you one more. This one is also hilarious. Let me just show you. So this one, it just takes a minute. Okay. So it says U.S. intercepts Russian bombers 200 miles west of Alaska.
That's Russia.
Exactly.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, 12 miles off the coast of Alaska is Russia. So 200 miles. That's well into Russia. What the hell? Yeah. I mean, I guess there's other, depending on which direction, it could be it was open ocean too. Right?
It was Russians are in Russia is the headline. And it's like, this takes a second. See, they're not even that good. David was right. They're not even good. All it takes is just a second to imagine, where's Alaska in my head? What's hilarious. Yeah. It's not even that it's obvious. You just need to look at a map and you'll know that Russian planes are in Russia.
Yeah. And even Americans who are ignorant of geography tend to be aware of the existence of the Bering Strait, and they know that it's like really close between Alaska and Russia. I mean, you learn that at some point. I mean,
yes.
People have swum it. Like.
And to me, so it's funny because both the times in these headlines, they're trying to make China and Russia as aggressive, but China's hiding submarines in the South China Sea, which is in China. And then
Russia's hiding airplanes in Russia.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like the U.S. And so it's ridiculous. And so it's kind of funny because that triggered me when you said they're trying to amp up a war and pretend they're aggressive. And I just remembered that both of these headlines are basically Russians are in Russia and Chinese are in China.
Totally. Fantastic headlines.
Okay, and thank you so much. Can we have one final song? And which one is? Can you tell what song is this called?
I'll do one I just wrote recently called "Puritan Slaughter."
What is it about? If I may quickly
Atlanta.
Once again, they're asking why it happened. Like people have been wondering since 1694, after hanging all the women at the gallows in the midst of the colonial wars. Far south of New England in the city of Atlanta, where the Grim Reaper descended. Here in the land of Puritan slaughter, where the witch trials never ended. Once again, they're asking why it happened. The cops said he was having a bad day. After 8 people died in 3 mass shootings, you'd think he might have something else to say. But not here in this nation of pogroms that you can hear daily defended. Here in the land of Puritan slaughter, where the witch trials never ended. Once again, they're asking why it happened. All of these Asian women killed by a Bible-thumping gun nut enforcing God's will. He was on his way to Florida when he was finally apprehended. Here in the land of Puritan slaughter, where the witch trials never ended. Once again, they're asking why it happened. They'll keep asking again and again. In this colonized country, founded by Christian con men, barging in, guns a-blazing, for so long, so many lives rended. In this land of Puritan slaughter, where the witch trials never ended. Once again, they're asking why it happened. Like people have been wondering since 1694.
Thank you so much. And this was a pleasure. And sorry we took so long, but you were a pleasure to talk to. And
it was really
so
fun.
much.
I had a great time. Thank you.
So I hope we can have you back again. And I will DM you on Twitter because I have I'd love to get your song lists of all the topics because you seem to actually do public awareness with your songs, right?
Yeah, definitely. Popular education through current events in history. And basically, if anytime you're doing a broadcast on whatever subject, I'm happy to provide a song either by me or somebody else because I might know somebody.
I actually have, this is not a broadcast, but there's a story that's like so inspirational.
Tell me.
It's about this house in, it's about this house in somewhere in Russia that basically stood longer than the entire country of Paris against Nazis.
Wow.
So I'm going to send you the article I wrote about it. And
please do.
Whenever you can, it would be amazing to have it. It's called Pavlov's House. Yakov Pavlov. He deserves the song.
And I also, and I need to write a song. There's a few song commissions that have been waiting for years for a song, but one of the songs I need to write is a song for Yuri Gagarin. So if you have any ideas for a good song about Yuri Gagarin, the first person in space, I would love to have any ideas you might have.
Okay,
I just figured it might be something you have an idea about.
Yes, I was
Russophile. I mean,
I love Russia. So when I went to Moscow about a year ago, it was amazing in that it's so beautiful.
Love to go.
I mean, like it's like so people think that Russians are depressing and gray, and it's not. It's just ordinary buildings are a work of art. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah. I would love to go.
It's beautiful. It's literally my favorite. And I'm hoping I'm kind of getting my visa stuff ready so I can go again. But I love Russia. And
great.
It's amazingly beautiful. The food is, you'll see how much the food is excellent. And
oh, really? Cool.
Yeah.
I never heard much about Russian food. But
when you don't have usually people don't, I didn't know this. All food tastes good as long as you use good ingredients. So when you don't have genetically modified, they're going to say something weird. Okay. When you don't have laboratory created ingredients from a processor, it automatically tastes better, right?
Yeah. That's sure been my experience. Have you been to Minsk? I want to go to Minsk too. I've heard great things about Minsk.
No, I have not. I've only been to Moscow. I would love to go to Minsk. And so, it's just that there's so much to do. And I was also doing an economic seminar and a conference there that it was I was just overwhelmed with this Moscow.
Yeah. There's so much there.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, how did we get into the topic of Russia? What were we talking about?
I can't remember something. How did Russia come?
Oh, I know. The little house that could. Okay. So I sent you the article via Twitter.
Could. Oh, great. Yeah, it's like the little train that could, huh?
Yeah. So basically this is, and then so I saw a meme and I tried to fact check it. And then when I saw reality, I was like, why is there not 10,000 movies about this?
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many. And like that, who was that woman? Another one I want to write a song about is there's statues of her around, I think she was from Crimea, a woman who was like an expert sniper during the war and was.
Oh, Woody Guthrie wrote a song about her. I forgot. And the anti-fascist.
That's right. I heard about that recently.
I think it's called the anti-fascist or something like, or the partisan or something like that. I forgot what his song was. Yeah. Ludmila, right? Pavlichenko.
That's right.
Yeah. So, well, Yakub Pavlov, as far as I know, does not have any songs, and just read his thing. And it is,
right.
So he did something that Superman does, except he actually did it. And it's not a work of a comic book.
Great.
And thank you so much. And I became a patron. How does that work? What's the word?
Patron on Patreon? Yeah.
Wait, what are you when you subscribe on Patreon? Am I your Patreon or Patreon?
You're a patron on Patreon.
Yes, I just did. And thank you so much. And it was so fun. And maybe in a few months we can have you back again.
I'd love to come back. Yeah.
Well, with that, okay. Paka.
Tapaka.